Welcome to this talk on grace and gliding into grace. So one of the things that I've been doing recently is writing this book, and the title of the book is The Sanctuary of Silence. A month ago, 2 months ago, I was meditating and I was in this space where the spiritual masters were there, Muniraj was there, Tara Singh was there, and I felt really this deep peace in their presence. And then it came to me, well, this is a sanctuary. This is a sanctuary of silence. And Muniraj himself, the meaning of even his name, Muni Raj, is like the king of silence. And Tara Singh, who was my teacher of the Course in Miracles, always emphasized that to receive any truth or something like the Course in Miracles, to receive the actual vibration of it or the truth of it, you had to be in this state of inner silence. And basically that's what he taught. He taught us to kind of stop our inner chatter and come to this space of silence, and then read the lesson in the Course in Miracles, because you were in a more receptive place to hear it. So if you read it and you haven't done that silencing of your thought, it's just more blah, blah, blah. You know, you read this, you read that, you read the newspaper, you read your emails, you read the Course in Miracles, and it doesn't penetrate as well. It does a little, but not on the deep level. So anyhow, I was meditating and I was in this kind of deep silence when I had this encounter with my teachers, and then it was like an empty space they were in, and this space was super quiet. It was like nothing. You could hear a pin drop. It was that quiet. And I was in that space for a little while, maybe a few minutes, and this sense of joy, inner peace came over me, like kind of a delight, kind of a well-being. And I realized that this was a sanctuary. And then I got this phrase kind of coming into my mind, the sanctuary of silence. And then that became clear, well, that was going to be the next book that I would work on. And I would start this book, and the whole book would be imparting silence. Now, you might say, well, how can you talk and be silent at the same time? And this was my concern too. Like, I didn't want it to be just writing about silence. I wanted it to be imparting the silence. So I had to be very responsible. Whatever I was going to say, whatever I was going to write, I would have to be in that state of the inner silence. And whatever I would write would then be from that silence and have a much better possibility of bringing the reader into that space of silence. So that was kind of the vision I had of writing this book. And then I wrote an introduction. I wrote one chapter. And then I thought, well, I really need somebody to share this with who's seriously interested in the same thing. And before, when I wrote a book, I would get an editor. So I would pay an editor to, proofread the whole book when I got it finished, make corrections with spelling, punctuation, that sort of thing. But it was kind of a mechanical relationship, you know. It was, well, you pay somebody to do this. You pay a plumber to fix your sink. You pay an editor to fix your words, right? But I wanted something more than that, and so I thought, well, who in my immediate field might be interested in reading this as I go? So I found a close student who was interested in reading each chapter as I wrote it, which has been a very good relationship because it's kept me kind of going and being very much on track with this project. So I'll write one chapter and then I'll send it to my friend and she'll read it and of course pick up any typos or misspelled words. That's kind of the standard. But she also is making comments if I'm not communicating clearly. So she'll say, yeah, in that chapter, in that paragraph, you could have said that better, or this line isn't quite clear to me. So it's been a wonderful relationship back and forth. So as I write and I send her the chapter, then she looks it over and gives me the comments. So it's been a real holy relationship writing this book, which has been different than before. I didn't have that going on. I would write a book, I would be kind of by myself with my thoughts, and now it's really kind of a dialogue, and I really appreciate that. So I mentioned the book because the last few chapters I've been very focused on grace. And what is grace? What is it? How does it work in our life? How do we become more aware of the grace? You know, there are a couple of very important lessons in A Course in Miracles, lesson 168 and 169, and they go something like this. 68 says, "Your grace is given me, I claim it now." And then the next one says, "By grace I live, by grace I am released." So when you look at those lessons very carefully, which I've been doing, you see that grace is something that is bestowed on us, but we're not always present to receive it. And as my teacher Tara Singh often said, when there's a quality, a divine quality, let's just say peace or joy, or in this case, grace, he said, well, the divine quality is always there. It's always present, but we are absent from it through whatever distraction, through whatever problems we manufacture, through whatever aches and pains we're going through in the moment. So the grace is there, but we are not there with it. It doesn't mean the grace is not there because we're not seeing it. The grace is always there. So what do we need to do to make contact with it, really is the question. So this is also what's described in those lessons. You know, it talks about your grace, meaning God's grace, is given, and I claim it now. Well, if we're not having the grace, that means we're not claiming it, right? So if the grace is there and we're not feeling it, then we're not putting ourselves in that mental space or that inner space to receive the grace. So it's really our responsibility. And okay, so it does say you have to prepare yourself for grace. In fact, it's not something you can learn. it says that the grace is bestowed on you by your Creator, and it's beyond your learning. However, there is learning that you have to do before you can receive the grace. So what does Jesus mean by that when he talks in that term? Well, the grace is always there, like Tara Singh said. Grace is there, peace is there, we're absent. Okay, so how do we become present to receive the grace? Would that be a good question that we all have? We want to receive the grace. There's something that kind of blocks us. What is that? What do we need to do? What is it we do need to learn to prepare ourselves to receive the grace? So that's kind of the subject of this talk. Well, when you go more deeply into those lessons, it talks about forgiveness, okay? And I would say 3/4 of the action of A Course in Miracles is this forgiveness process. You know, it says forgiveness offers everything I want. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. Forgiveness, it says forgiveness is my function as the light of the world. So there's an extreme emphasis on forgiveness. And then there's this prayer. It's in lesson 291, and it talks about complete forgiveness. It says, let my forgiveness be complete, and let the memory of you return to me. It's in this beautiful prayer in lesson 291. Let my forgiveness be complete, and let the memory of you return to me. So this memory of our Creator is the grace, okay? So it's like this few moments I had in this space where I said I met with Muniraj and Tara Singh, and there was this incredibly deep sense of well-being, this peace. Well, I had a few moments of grace. And how could I be there? Well, in that moment, my forgiveness was complete. I didn't have any grievances toward myself, towards my partner, my family, my siblings, my co-workers, my students, my clients. I had no grievances in those few moments, right? Nothing I would want to change, nothing I would want to project, nothing I would want to achieve. I was just totally neutral. I had no charge on anything. Well, that was a few moments of forgiveness being total, being complete. So this is the preparation we need to do. How do we make our forgiveness complete? Well, it's an ongoing process. You know, it's practice. That is the part you do learn. You know, it talks about learning in the Course in Miracles, but it also talks about things like grace that cannot be learned. They can only be given. They can only be bestowed on you by a higher life force, or call it God, call it your Creator, call it the Divine Mother, whatever you want to call it, but it's a force of life bigger than you. And that force is what's going to impart to you the grace. And in fact, the grace has already been imparted, but we're not in the vibration to receive it. So this forgiveness process, which is what we teach in Liberation Breathing, it's what the Course teaches, it's basically what any authentic teacher will teach. It's undoing all the thoughts in your mind that are misperceived, all the thoughts that are grievances, attack thoughts, judgments, those kind of thoughts. Well, those are the blocks to receiving the grace. So we have to deal with those. I mean, we wake up in the morning, we say, oh, you know, we have a moment of not wanting to be here, or a moment of dread. Well, that's blocking the grace as well. So we're responsible for our inner atmosphere. You know, what is in the atmosphere inside your head? Is it grievances? Is it judgments? Is it dread? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it, any number of things? Anger, irritation, and these things come up during our day. I had a little moment this morning, and there are these two lessons that I wanted to get recorded on a podcast. I think one of them I already did. I think it was the first one. Your grace has given me, I claim it now. And I wanted to do a recording on this other lesson, by grace I live, by grace I am released. And usually Sandra and I have a dialogue on a lesson, and we record that, and that becomes our podcast. And we have quite a few podcasts on the Course in Miracles. So this morning I was into this mode of, okay, I did the one, let's do the other one. But Sandra was totally not in the mood. So I'm reading through the lesson, and I'm seeing, she's really not present. She doesn't really want to do it. And I had a moment of, well, darn it, why aren't you present? It was a reaction. It was judgment. It was dissatisfaction, And in those moments, I was a bit irritated. Well, that is the exact opposite of grace, and the exact opposite of what that lesson would be trying to get me into, right? But at least I saw it. I saw what I was doing, and I said, okay, you're not in the mood for this. We don't have to do it now. So I dropped it. But this is what I mean. Forgiveness is an ongoing, in the moment process, and we all have to do it. We all have to become kind of samurai at forgiveness, because things come up, very subtle things come up, and maybe it's not a huge upset, but there is a lesson that says if you're even the least bit irritated, you're walking the carpet of death. So we're spiritual seekers, right? We're students of a spiritual life. So what is it that we're observing? Well, we're just observing the inner workings of our own mind and trying to clean that up. And as we clean that up and make our forgiveness complete, then we're more and more aware of this grace that surrounds us. Just to summarize, how do you prepare yourself to receive the grace? Well, make sure you've forgiven everybody and everything. And I know that's not always easy. And it's not always something that you do once and then you don't have to revisit it again. Like I've had a turbulent relationship with my sister, I think probably my whole life. And I'm going to be 67 years old next month. So for 67 years, it's been a difficult relationship. And it's better now, definitely better. And we can communicate. But there are certain things that still go on between us that breaks the communication down. And I see that. So it's still my work. It's still my job to clean that relationship up in my mind and my heart. And that's what's making my forgiveness complete. And I've more or less signed up for that sister just to learn the lessons of forgiveness. And this is true for any person we have in our life who plugs us in or pushes our buttons. They're there for our own evolution. And rather than be kind of upset about it, we should be embracing it and saying, well, I made more progress forgiving my sister than any other spiritual practice I ever did in my life. So we all probably have those people. You could probably even do an inventory. the people that plug me in the most, A, B, C, and see what you come up with. Because those are the very relationships that are blocking our receptivity to this state of grace. So that's the one thing, I think the most important thing, removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. The Course starts out like that. So forgiveness is that key. And that's what we have to practice, and that's what we have to master. Okay, so there's that element of preparing ourselves for grace. So another element that I was happily aware of writing this book, I wrote this chapter on this artist. I don't know, maybe you're familiar with him, maybe you're not. He's a fairly famous artist in Renaissance times, and his name was El Greco. So El Greco actually painted in Toledo, Spain. Most of his masterpieces were painted there. And he had a very unique style. His figures were kind of elongated, and his color sense was very, unusual for the times. He used a lot of bright colors in his paintings. So I'm studying this artist, El Greco, in this one chapter, and I was looking into his life. Well, how did he arrive at where he was with his painting? Because it's known all over the world now. He's not as famous as Michelangelo, but he's in that genre of painters of the high Renaissance towards the end, that all the history books have El Greco in them. And I've actually been to Toledo a couple of times to see his works there. So he interested me. So I got to studying his background, like where did he come from, how did he get to where he was, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting story. He was born on the island of Crete, and at that time, people in Crete, they spoke Greek, so they were basically in the kind of Greek culture. However, Crete at that time when he was born was a colony of Venice. And in the 15th century Italy, there were these city-states that were very powerful, and Venice was one of them. And not only was Venice a powerful city-state, but because it had excellent trade routes leading to Venice, it was like the merchants' capital of Europe. It would be like New York City is now, or London, okay? So Venice was this big power of trade, commerce, and the arts, and it owned Crete. So when El Greco was a boy, and he has a very long Greek name that I can't pronounce, but when he was a boy, he was from a fairly well-to-do family, so he wanted to be a painter, and he was trained in Crete to be an icon painter, which, if you know about that history, there was like the Eastern Roman Empire that was in Constantinople or Byzantine. There was like the Byzantine style that was really pre-Renaissance. But he studied those techniques of Byzantine icon painting. So he was very religious in an authentic way. He really wanted to paint these icons that would help people make contact with these spiritual masters. So he mastered this art of icon painting. And it was different than the Renaissance painting at the time. But when he felt like he mastered that, of course, he was going to go to Venice to further his studies. So that's what he did. He traveled to Venice. That would be like a painter now going to New York, or years before going to Paris. So he went to Venice, and he became a student of these two painters, Titian and Tintoretto. So he studied with Titian, and Titian had like a color, like a very strong color sense. And his compositions were more conventional, but his color sense was revolutionary, right? He used these bright colors. And partly because Venice was a center of commerce, some of these pigments were coming from like Afghanistan and India and China, colors that had never appeared in the palettes of Western art, right? So he's in Venice, these new colors are coming in, and he picks up that in his work. And then another thing he picked up, Tintoretto was this other artist, and his compositions were very dynamic. They had a lot of action, a lot of figures kind of in diagonal positions. This was very unusual and very dynamic perspectives. So Tintoretto was this master of composition, and Titian was this master of color and technique. And so he got the best of those two painters. And then he tried to go to Rome and set up shop and get commissions, but he was there for 3 years and he didn't get one commission. So then he went back to Venice for a short period. And before you know it, he says, well, I'm giving up on this. I'm moving to Spain. So he moves to Spain, and his style is very unique, and he tries to get in the Spanish court in Madrid, and he submits some examples, and the king doesn't like his work. So again, he's like rejected, right? So he studies intensely for about 10 years, and then when he goes to set up his own shop, rejection, 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 rejection. No one can cope with his unique style, right? So he goes to Toledo, and like magic, he gets a couple of commissions, and these noblemen in Toledo absolutely love his unique style. Like they can't get enough of it, right? And this count gives him his castle to live in and paint in and be who he is, right? So all this meandering through Crete, then to Venice, then to Rome, then back to Venice, and then finally he moves to Spain and he gets rejected by the king. And then finally it's like he's ready to give up, and he moves to Toledo, and all of a sudden he's like, they can't get enough of his work. So the reason I tell this story is because that's another way grace works in our life. So, and it's something beyond what we can plan. You know, we can plan and plot out our life a certain way, and we can say, well, I want to be a this, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, and we have those plans that we make. So for me, it was like, well, I want to be an artist. I'm going to go to art school, and I go to the Cleveland Institute of Art, and then I go to Philadelphia, and I study art there and get my master's degree. And all of that's all well and good. But then I meet up with the Course in Miracles and Sandra Ray and rebirthing, and now that part I did not plan. That was almost like coming to me to fulfill some destiny that I had, but it's not something that I was aware that I should be pursuing, right? So just like El Greco never, if you would have asked him in Venice when he was studying art, where do you think you'll end up? He never would have said Toledo. I mean, it's probably not even on the map, right? So he goes to Spain, and his final rejection, and then somebody probably said, well, they're looking for a painter down in this church in Toledo. Why don't you go there and see what you can do? And he went there, and his whole life started to flower then. And basically, his whole life was grace from that moment on. But the preparation for him to receive it was also going on. I think one of the things that we have to get in our life with experience and especially experiences that don't work out or are painful, or at some point we move beyond them, is they were teaching us what doesn't work, or they were teaching us what not to do. And that certainly was operating in my life. So I went to art school. I ended up in Philadelphia studying art. After I got out of art school, I made a studio. I was married to someone else. She was an artist as well. We bought a property. Then we bought a studio, and we made a studio for ourselves. She was a ceramic artist. So now we're in operation, right? But then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe we're not so happy. Maybe we're not so with it, So my ex-wife started doing rebirthing, and we'd never heard of it. So she got a session of rebirthing and then did a number of sessions, and I could see the changes in her. And then I started doing the rebirthing. And then before you know it, Sandra Ray's coming to town to teach an LRT, which we took. And certainly we could see the cracks in our relationship even back then. But it was truth, it was honest. So we were looking at ourselves, introspecting, making changes, and growing. And then Sandra introduced us to the Course in Miracles in 1985, and that really sang to me. So I start looking into the Course in Miracles and reading it, doing the lessons. And then before you know it, she says, well, we take people to India. So my ex and I went on an India quest, and then we went back again in 1989. So we went in 87, and we went back to India again on the quest in 89. But by then I had been studying the Course for 4 or 5 years. And I asked this teacher there were 2 teachers, Muniraj and Sastraji. I asked him, well, what's my destiny with this Course in Miracles? Because I'm so interested in it, I can't put it down, and I've been studying it. He said, well, you will teach it, but you're not ready yet. And that's all he said about it. And then that year in 1989, I met Tara Singh, who had been groomed by Dr. Shukman to share the Course. So he and Kenneth Wapnick were the really 2 authentic teachers of the Course. And there was Tara Singh right in my midst. And it's interesting because he had been a Sikh in India before he came to the West. And I had also studied some Sikhism with Yogi Bhajan years before. So I recognized that, oh, if his name is Singh, he's probably a Sikh. And he also had this Kara bangle on that all Sikh men wear. So I recognized him. I went to his workshop, and he brought me to this state of inner silence that I'd only experienced one time before in India with Muniraj. And so when I was in this inner silence, I thought, wow, this is something that's unique, and he's my teacher. So he was my teacher. I was with him for 17 years, doing his workshops, studying the Course. I pretty much lost track of Sandra Ray. I was still painting and doing my work in Philadelphia, but I was also going to his workshops, studying the Course, and getting closer and closer to him as my teacher. So that relationship went till 2006 when he passed away. And then I was in a bit of a limbo. And this is when I didn't quite know what next. I was not so happy in my old marriage, and I knew I had to leave it. And I knew I had a destiny with the Course in Miracles, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. But grace took over. I got out of the marriage. I got the divorce, I moved out, and as soon as I completed that, Sandra Ray shows up again in my life. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. And that was one step that was my destiny. And we got together, and we've been together ever since, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And this function I have to write and share the course couldn't even start until that chapter of my life started. So what I'm trying to say is that the grace of my life's journey was working every step of the way, even though I wasn't seeing it. You know, like I had to go to art school, then I had to be in that relationship with my ex for 30 years to learn those lessons of what not to do. And then I had to move to Philadelphia, which is where I met Sandra Ray. And then I had to go to India and meet those spiritual masters there and get clear about my own destiny with the Course in Miracles. And then I had to meet Tara Singh and be in that relationship for 17 years. And then that had to come to an end before I could be with Sandra Ray. And that whole 30-year marriage had to come to an end. So what I'm saying is we all have a destiny, and grace is operating, whether we're aware of it or not. And it's moving us to our highest good. And I think that's really important to see. It's like when you trust your life, you forgive all the mistakes you've made, and we've made plenty of them along the way. And when you can get to that space where you're empty or free of judgment, then grace is closer to your awareness and you can claim it. See, that's the lesson. Your grace is given me, I claim it now. So there's a point where we have to see that the grace was operating through this meander in life, right? So I went through this meander, Cleveland, Ohio, Philadelphia, then, okay, Tara Singh, going to India, all those trips. I even went to India with Tara Singh on a couple of occasions. So all those trips had to happen, you know, and then he had to pass away and my marriage had to end before my real mission in life could even start. So, and that was all part of grace operating. Just like with El Greco, you know, he's born on Crete. He goes to New York City, which is Venice at the time. He learns to be a master painter, but nobody wants his work, right? Because he wasn't meant to be in Italy. He was meant to be in Spain. You know, I never in 1,000 years would have thought I would be living in Washington, D.C. It didn't even cross my mind, you know. But at some point we were directed here, and it's been more or less the most perfect 4 years of my life. So, you know, this is how the grace works. And we have to be open to seeing it like that, okay? And just be gentle with whatever your history looks like, and also be gentle with what your present looks like. So we're writing this book, my friend and I, and I'm really kind of pleased with the way it's going. I have 100 pages already written, and I've only been working on it for maybe 4 or 5 weeks, you know. And so that relationship's going well. And I feel it's maybe one of the best things I've written so far. And yeah, so I'm delighted with not only what I'm writing about, but also the relationship I have with this friend who's helping me. So that's truly a holy relationship. And if there's anything that's gracious in this book, it'll be inspired by this holy relationship I have with the lady that's helping me. So I'm looking forward to where it's going. So I have this background in the arts, I never thought I would be writing books. I kept journals all my life. I was an avid journaler, and most of my journals would be like, oh, a little painting over here, and then I'd write something, then I'd do a little painting, and so they're kind of like combination, little watercolors and writing comments. So that's kind of how I operated. And then when I got together with Sandra and I showed her one of these journals, she says, wow, you know, your writing is really profound. You should do that more. And so then this was a beautiful action of grace in my life. We were in Bali, and I'd never been there before. And it's absolutely beautiful, the art there, the culture, how the art is melded with nature, the architecture and the nature kind of fit together seamlessly. So I was having this wonderful experience. And then one night we were in this hotel that was a fairly nice hotel, and the hotel brought in these Balinese dancers to give their performance. And I was totally blown away, totally moved by the perfection of this dance and the beauty of it and the color. And some of you have been to Bali with us, so you know what I'm talking about. And I was just totally moved. So before you knew it, I was writing these poems. I was writing these sort of prose poems about this experience with the dance. And I wrote maybe, I don't know, 10 or 12 of these poems. And they were also honoring the Divine Mother, because in Bali, they very much honor the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is like supreme, right? And so I'm writing these poems about the dancers, and then all of a sudden I see myself writing these poems talking to the Divine Mother. And they're not just in Bali, but they're, I mean, it could be shopping in Nordstrom's, and I'm sitting in the chair waiting for Sandra to finish her shopping, and I'm writing some kind of an ode to the Divine Mother about this environment. So it could be anywhere about anything, because the Divine Mother is everywhere. So I just kept up writing these journals, with these short one-page entries. And then that became my first book, Odes to the Divine Mother. So before you knew it, I had this book of Odes to the Divine Mother. It took 4 years to accumulate it. But I stuck with it. I wrote, not every day, but every week at least, I wrote a few. And then after a while, the collection of these odes became the Odes to the Divine Mother. And I had another friend at the time help me put that together. So before you know it, I was launched writing books. And that was all part of the grace. So I'm sharing about myself because it's what I know, but you also have things in your life that you can chart. Oh yes, that was grace operating. You know, that was grace in my life operating. So there's a deep gratitude you have when you realize that my life, yes, I was in control of it and I was the captain of my ship, but there was also a more benevolent, higher force moving me around for the lessons I needed to learn. And that's how I arrived where I am now. And all that action was an action of grace. So I think we need to look at that. And we need to get the gratitude, you know. So gratitude and grace go hand in hand. We have to see the gratitude for even the tough incidents in our life, or the things that looked like they didn't work out, you know, and what were the lessons learned. You know, I had this experience where I wanted to put a show of my paintings together, and I rented this ballroom in a very fine hotel in Philadelphia, which cost a lot to rent it for 2 or 3 nights. And I got all my paintings together and I hung all my paintings in this ballroom, and I sent out all these invitations. And it was a beautiful experience for me to see all my work together in one place. And people did come, quite a few people came. But I didn't sell enough paintings to pay my expenditures. I had the money to spend, but I think in the end I was in the red by, I don't know, $6,000 or $7,000. So I spent all this money to show my work, and one of the reasons was to get my work out there and have it be self-sustaining financially, and it was just the opposite. It's like I spent money that I didn't make back, so I lost money on the venture. But looking back on it, it was a very valuable experience for me to see how to not do it, to see all my work in one place, to see what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses in the painting. So it gave me a lot of vision. And but I had to forgive myself for it failing financially. So that was an experience where grace was still operating, but at the time it certainly didn't feel like grace. So that's kind of how we have to look at our challenging experiences, is to see they're learning experiences. There's a lesson 193, I believe. All things are lessons God would have me learn. All things are lessons God would have me learn. So that's a good anesthesia when you're going through something really difficult and it seems like a total bust or a total failure. And then you see, well, this experience is just a lesson God is having me learn. And I think if we could see our experiences that way, we would be staying more in the grace and less in the judgment, less in the depression, less in the whatever it is, feeling bad. So I think, to summarize, there are a couple of things. One, how do you prepare yourself for the grace? Forgive everybody and everything, and including yourself. Forgiveness is truly the key to happiness, and it's truly the doorway into another state of being while we're here in this life, to this peace, heaven on earth, whatever you want to call that, grace, that state that's already there bestowed on us, but we're not receiving it because we're too preoccupied with the past, regrets from the past, or we're too afraid of the future, what might happen if, so we live in the past and we live in the future with fear, and we live in the past with regrets. Well, that's blocking us seeing the grace that's here right now. So we have to stop doing that. And how do we do it? Through forgiveness. We forgive ourselves for the past, everything. And there's a lesson, I place the future in the hands of God. That's 194. I place the future in the hands of God. Why do I have to worry about it? I've got enough to handle right here in present time. So just live your day in present time, and what you have before you on your plate today is sufficient. You don't have to be thinking, too far in advance. I mean, if we're planning a quest or, like the Iceland quest, we're planning another Iceland quest in January, we do have to make some plans, airline tickets, hotel reservations, that sort of thing. So we have to think a little bit about the future. But once those basic mechanical things are done, it's a different energy, You have to be grateful in the moment for what's here now. And that gratitude is what's going to extend into the future and make that next Iceland quest work for us and everyone. So it's like our present vibration is what's going to extend into the future. So we have to be responsible for that. You know, are we in a state of joy right now? And joy is not something that's, oh, well, we'll have the joy when we get to Iceland. No, the joy has to be now. And the joy has to be attractive now. And that's the grace, that's the preparation. And then the grace is here now. So we have to claim it, we have to receive it now. It's not in the future, and it's not in the past, it's in the present. So I would say that would be the third most important point. First, it's forgive everybody. Second, it's see that grace always was operating in your whole life, moving you to where you are now. And then third is be in the now. You know, a lot of writers have written books on that. Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. You know, it's a cliche. It's a cliche. But who is? Who is in the present? Are you? Are you in the present with gratitude? Or are you in the past with regrets, or in the future with fears? So this is where we have to do the work. And it's work to stay in the present. But what other better work is there? Because if the grace is only in the present, and our work is to be with the grace, be in the present, then what more glorious work would there be to do than that? So that's our glorious work to do, is let go of the past, don't project into the future, and be happy in the now, and grateful in the now. So that's the best I can do in gliding into grace. So when we fulfill those three, you know, we forgive everyone, we have gratitude for our whole life and how it's unfolded, and then we're determined to be in the present, not projecting past, not projecting future. Then we're in the now, and that's where the grace is, and we can receive it. So that's pretty much it. And then it's easy. We glide. That's why I use the word glide. Well, when you're gliding, it's effortless, right? You know, that swan in that picture. You know, when you see a swan going across the water, it's effortless. They're not even moving, but they're going across the water. You wonder how they're doing it. You know, they're just gliding in grace. And it's interesting, swan. I think the word swan in Sanskrit also means like grace, God, because Ramakrishna was known by this symbol of the swan, and he was a spiritual master. So swan, grace, gliding, they're all beautiful symbols for grace. So I've spoken for about an hour, and I'm going to open it up to any questions people have. So you can ask a question, but just remember to unmute yourself, and then when you're done, mute yourself back. And that, I think it's the little microphone in your lower left screen. You can unmute yourself. Yeah, so anybody have a question? Barbara, nice to see you. Kathy.
Nice being here.
Yeah.
And that was beautifully well spoken as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Good to see you.
Exactly what I needed to. I've seen grace work in and out of my life, like I said, in and out. Mm-hmm. And I have a family in and out. But to figure out, and it's right now I'm at the places I need it in.
Yes.
And I know I'm there, but I didn't understand. So you filled up all the gaps. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Well, don't be a stranger and communicate with us, okay? You all You all should have our email. I'm sure you do because I got your, yeah. So anybody communicates to us, we write them back personally every time. It's a relationship we have with you, and we love that. So.
Okay, I just didn't want to bother you.
No, don't think that. Don't think that. Nobody's ever a bother. We're always happy to hear from anybody, and you're part of our grace. You are our grace. So you writing to us is just our grace coming to us. So we're always happy to hear. And if people write us, or they have a problem, or they have a mood or something they're stuck in, and we go right to work on that. Behind us is this Divine Mother altar, and what we usually do is we put their name on a card. Maybe if there's an issue they're having, we write that on there and stick it under the altar cloth, and we review those people every day. And so we're kind of working on it. And it's not all just clients that pay us for sessions. It's friends, it's family, it's people like you all over the world. And I think right now we have quite a large stack of cards under the cloth there. And it's amazing how it works. So that's a part of grace. Part of that lesson, it says, by grace I live, by grace I am released. But then the second half of that prayer, it says, by grace I give, and by grace I will release. So when you receive the grace and you feel it in your own life, by grace I live, by grace I'm released. Well, the release is you're forgiven and everybody else is too, right? So that's the release. You've forgiven everyone. They've forgiven you. It's pure ho'oponopono. I forgive them, they forgive me. So that's the grace. But then once you're in that state, you have the capacity to give it. You have the capacity to give the grace. So when someone comes to you with a problem, you go within and you send them the grace. And I guarantee you that is not a fantasy. When you have received the grace and you feel the grace in your life working, you have the capacity to give the grace. By grace I give, by grace I will release. So you're releasing within yourself those problems that those people come to you with. You're cleaning it up in yourself and you're extending the grace, and that has a big impact on the situation. I can't tell you how powerful that is, because basically you've turned it over to the divine and you've said, okay, I hear this problem, I'm hearing about it, they need your help, they need the grace, and my meditating on that and sending that and putting their names under the altar is going to send that actual energy to be helpful, So when it's like our job. Well, what is your job? It's not being a lawyer or a doctor or a speaker or an artist. No, it's to receive the energy of grace, the vibration of who we are as God created us, and then extend that out to everybody else who's as God created. So then that's our mission. That's our ministry, you could call it. I love what Sandra always says, well, who's your ministry? She says, well, the people in your address book and your Facebook friends and, your Twitter followers and, all of that. Well, that's all part of our ministry. And we're having an impact on everybody we meet, basically. So everybody we meet are people in our ministry, and we have a responsibility to uplift ourselves in that higher vibration. So then what we are putting out to others is an elevated state, an inspired state, something that will help them rise up in their happiness. That's our job. So what better job could we have than that? That's our real job. It's not to go to a job and feel disgruntled, like, oh, I hate my job and oh, got to pay my rent and blah, blah, blah. No, it's to be happy. That's our real job, is to be happy and then spread that joy to other people and uplift them too. And it will make an impact. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this month I have been doing that because so much has come in my space.
Yeah.
With dying and COVID and kids missing and just everything. And so, I would have to stop automobile accidents, someone in a coma, and I've had to stop and pray. And I've been doing a lot of Ho'oponopono for myself. So I guess this is what I need, because this morning I was telling God, I said, well, I'm not really working in a sense. I'm working from home a little bit. But I said, I don't, well, how do you do all this? Because it was, there's just barely enough time for me to like go to the bathroom, wash my face, eat, And I'm like, oh my God. But, positive things are coming, out of it. But I needed this to understand what's going on and understand how to go forward with it. So it's beautiful.
Well, Barbara, you're a naturally positive person. Most people on this call are, or they wouldn't be here. You're sort of a naturally positive person, and you have a spark of joy already in you naturally, right? So rely on that more. And I know sometimes it does feel like we're being overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, but it's not all the time. It's just this month. It was just, there was always a call of something that was, kind of like scary. Somebody had to do something, so I would immediately, stop.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Well, we've had some deaths not in our immediate family, but friends of ours have had to go through some deaths and have to deal with that, and it's just part of it. And we teach people longevity, but it's okay if people don't get it, and if it's okay if they leave their body, they're loved by God just as much, So, and we have to see it that way, that what people's destiny is perfect for them. And if that means leaving their body at a certain time, that's okay. That's okay. But it's just, that's what we do in life. Things come up, things come up and we deal with it. And the grace will help get us through it. Yeah. So.
Well, I've been with y'all for about 20 some years. So you've helped me to get to this part, to be the person.
Very good. Very good.
Everybody, I say, stick with you and Sandra.
Oh, well, thank you.
I have a question about anxiety.
Yeah.
I think in my life, I've always learned to create the future. You had to use some strengths and to be go for it. And that has always created anxiety in my life.
Yes.
And this ups and downs produced to be successful. And I think, how do you wait? I was inspired with you talking about the Iceland quest and somehow waiting for it to unfold, because that's where I really have a problem, because I get anxious.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the question. Okay, so the question is, how do we stay out of the pressure? And I know you probably have a thought like I have to do it all myself, and if I don't do it, it won't get done, right? You probably have that thought a little bit. Yeah, and you're a person like me that can't always receive help. And so, and I think that the way I'm getting through it, because I have a little bit of that going on myself, is I have to see that I can only do what I can do in a day, and my only job is to do the priority. So I've been better at prioritizing. Like, okay, this has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be done. And I do those things first. And when I have my list, I try to bless it and not feel like it's overwhelming or a pressure. I just say, well, I'm going to do these 3 things. They're the priority. And I'm going to enjoy doing these 3 things. So I'm in the moment with the joy on each of the things. So the list might get bigger, but the pressure is not there, or the fear is not there. And then as far as something like the Iceland quest, for me, I have a certain deadline where I have to have either enough people or it's not going to happen. So there's this deadline, and I just see it like, well, okay, I move towards that deadline when I have to have all the people signed up. And if they're not signed up, then it's okay if it doesn't happen. Like we were planning this 6-day liberation breathing intensive, and we thought, let's do it differently this time. Instead of having 5 days in a row where people have to take work out of their day, their work day, we'll have it 3 weekends in a row. So they don't have to miss work to be there on the weekend. Well, we failed to see very few people want to give up 3 weekends in a row. So it didn't happen. We didn't ask people first if they thought that was okay. But basically, when you think about it, are you willing to give up 3 weekends in a row? Maybe it would have been better have 1 weekend a month for 3 months, kind of thing. Or maybe the 5 days in a row wasn't so bad and people didn't mind, doing it all at once, and it was complete and then it was over. So it's just things that we go through where if something doesn't happen, it wasn't meant to happen, and we have to forgive ourselves for whatever that was and move on, and not let the to-do list be so insurmountable that we're in pressure all the time. And that's the main thing. Don't let your to-do list take you over. Your joy is more important than your to-do list. And you're a person who naturally likes to do stuff and be active and be productive. And as long as we have that intrinsically. So our job, people who like to do things, is to not let the doing get the better of us, where the grace is really more important. Staying in the peace, staying in the joy is more important than the to-do list. The to-do list will always be there, but will our joy always be there? That's the question. And that's our responsibility, to stay in that awareness of the joy, in the moment, in the present. So.
And also I get that if it doesn't happen, it's not my fault.
Yeah, right. It's nobody's fault. We laugh about it.
That's a good thought.
Yeah, we say, wow, why were we so stupid to think people would do 3 weekends in a row, scratch your head and say, okay, back to the drawing board. And it wasn't our fault. We were trying to improve upon it, and it just wasn't the right direction to improve upon it. But that's okay. We trial and error, like Edison tried about, a couple thousand experiments before he discovered the light bulb. And they asked him, well, weren't you discouraged with all those failures? He said, no, I discovered 2,000 ways not to do it. So he wasn't ever downtrodden about it all. He just tried the next thing. And that's how we are. I mean, life is a trial and error. You try this, it doesn't work, fine, you're innocent, move on. Even though I made a mistake, I still completely love and accept myself. That's an affirmation we use all the time when something doesn't go right. Even though it didn't go right, I still love and accept myself. So that's grace. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Norma, Vija, you guys good? Do we feel complete on this, on grace? So you'll read those 2 lessons, please. lesson 168 and 169. Your grace is given me. I claim it now. I claim it. And you do that by forgiving everything. Then you can claim it. And then by grace I live, by grace I'm released, by grace I give, by grace I will release. Then you can use the grace that you've received to extend out into your world to the people in your world. And then we're all gliding into grace. Let's all agree we're going to glide into grace, okay? Very good. God bless. Yep. Have a good day.